Did you know that there's a secret Turnpike Troubadours album that you can't find on streaming anymore? I'm talking about Bossier City, Turnpike Troubadours' fallen out of favor first album. In 2005, singer-songwriter Evan Felker and co-writer and bass player R.C. Edwards formed Turnpike Troubadours, and within the first month of forming the band, went into the studio to cut this album so that they could have a CD to sell at shows. As a young scrappy band playing the Oklahoma bar scene in the early 2000s, their best shot at being able to make decent money from shows was being able to sell merchandise, and at that point in time, physical CD sales were still very common in local music. Because this album was recorded so early in the band's career, they hadn't really figured out their identity just yet. As a result, Bossier City sets apart from other Turnpike Troubadours albums in a number of key ways, starting with the band lineup. For this session, Felker and Edwards were joined by John Fulbright, Casey Sliger, and Chad Masters. While John Fulbright has remained a frequent collaborator with the Turnpike Troubadours, apart from Evan and RC, who are kind of these core founding members for the band, none of these individuals are in Turnpike Troubadours any longer, nor would their time in the band last very long. Most notably missing from this album is the fiddle. Kyle Nix, Turnpike Troubadours' longtime fiddle player, had not yet joined the band. And of all the instruments and all the very talented musicians in the band, can you imagine Turnpike Troubadours without a fiddle? Hell no. Definitely not for a full album. Without Fiddle, and with the project's quick start not really allowing Turnpike the time to grow and develop their sound, Bossier City sounds like the product of a young red dirt band leaning into their cross-Canadian Ragweed influence. At the time, Ragweed was at the height of their influence in red dirt, and with Turnpike later becoming the heir evident to the scene, it's not surprising that their earliest project wears this influence on its sleeve. This is most evident in the electric guitar tone, as well as the way the instrument carries the band's sound through this project. Despite this, you do hear Turnpike's more folk-inspired influences start to take root on this album. Mandolin, harmonica, and accordion are present throughout this album, taking the edge off of the more electric sound. Evan's voice is notably less developed than it would be on Diamonds and Gasoline, and he's actually quite pitchy on a few songs. This doesn't surprise me too much. Any vocalist who's been around long enough should be able to look back at their old recordings and realize that they've grown. I'm painfully aware that I have. In addition, and I mean no shade by this, I love Evan as a songwriter. I think his voice has a really unique, interesting quality to it. But if you've ever listened to a live recording of Turnpike Troubadours, it's pretty evident that Evan does not have the best vocal technique. This has improved some post-sobriety, but it's pretty evident that he's not the strongest vocalist in every circumstance. I imagine Turnpike's later records devoted some time to retakes, or spent some resources on vocal processing to help with this. No disrespect meant to Evan, just I think that's probably the reality of the situation. If you've ever seen like a live TV appearance by them, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's unclear when this album actually made its way into circulation. Online, a lot of sources say that the album was released in December 2007, but given that the album was recorded in 2005 and there was this sense of urgency that the band needed to get a record out to sell at shows, in addition to the fact that early times with bands are often very poorly documented because the spotlight's not on them yet, I have a very hard time believing that the CDs weren't pressed for 2 years after they were recorded. Keep in mind, this was also before a time where anybody could get their albums up on major platforms. This was pre-streaming, it was the Napster era, and it wasn't really easy for artists to get their music online onto a platform like, well, iTunes would have been the dominant one of the time, through a platform like CD Baby or DistroKid, like anyone can do today. Well, I can't confirm why the 2007 date is so prevalent, and really I'm just taking a shot in the dark here. I have two guesses. First guess, early versions of Bossier City were burned at home by members of the band, with the first official pressing not coming out until 2007. And second, as an and/or option, because it doesn't really negate the first thing, it's possible that the record was picked up by an independent distributor in 2007, resulting in more widespread availability and professional packaging. At some point in the early 2010s, Turnpike disowned Bossier City as part of their official album discography, likely because it did not reflect their current sound and where they were heading as a band. Consequently, the album is no longer available on streaming platforms. Evan spoke about the lost album on a 2023 appearance on the Meat Eater podcast, where he said, "We did one album kind of in a garage in Durant, Oklahoma. The sound quality was not great." Evan went on to say that he doesn't really want the album in circulation, explaining that all the guys that we play with now weren't on it. Kyle wasn't in the band back then. It was a pretty young iteration of what we are now. And I think that's pretty fair. When you listen to the album, it does sound like a young, inexperienced band making their first album in the studio. However, that hasn't kept fans from latching onto it, nor has it stopped Turnpike from putting the spotlight on Bossier City from time to time. In 2016, Turnpike reissued Bossier City for a limited run, using the album as a way to raise money for Louisiana flood relief, leveraging fan interest in the album for a good cause. Additionally, updated versions of 2 songs from the album, Easton and Maine and the title track Bossier City, were later featured on the band's self-titled album. You can still find original pressings of the CD on eBay or Discogs from time to time, but it's going to come at a pretty hefty price tag. The good news for fans is, though, unofficial uploads of this album's tracks come up online all the time. There are some places online where you can listen to the full album. I don't want to give away where any of them are, though, because I really don't want to be responsible for accidentally getting one of those taken down. But suffice to say, if you search it up, you're probably going to be able to find this record. Is it a gem in the rough, or should it kind of just be kept aside in the Turnpike universe? Let me know in the comments below. My name is Brent Funkhauser from Red Moon Media. Thank you for watching. If you like this, please subscribe. I do other music commentary in the worlds of alternative country, Americana, roots music generally. Follow along and I might talk about some of your favorite artists next.